The objective: to deliver the NBA to you like no other. News, play breakdowns, power rankings, storylines you never hear talked about anywhere else. It's all straight shots here, fired by straight shooters. S and Gunn. This is the Objective Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Objective Basketball Podcast. It is free agency time. It is NBA draft time. It's over, but still it was. Get in the game. Make your next bet with Sports Interaction. Bet before the game or live in play on all your favorite teams' matchups. Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN or download the app to get started. 19 plus, please play responsibly. Lauren, my friend, it has been a while. How are you doing?
I am happy to be back, and what perfect timing to be back.
Yeah.
Right after the draft. No, I'm good. Rested after the vacation, ready to dive into the draft free agency, because even though it was teeing up like there might be a lot of trades leading into the draft, and there were, not on draft night, but there were a lot of trades. I still feel like it's just not even close to done. I just think there's more. There's just more coming. That's what I think. But I'm excited to talk about it all. I'm excited to be back because the offseason is going to be fun. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. As good as I can potentially be with how crazy life is right now on the basketball front of things. But I'm good. I'm great. Obviously, since you have left, I am covering the CEBL, Canadian Elite Basketball League. Very fun doing some sideline reporting for them. But overall, the NBA draft, the bonanza, the craziness, the transactions. Bradley Beal is a Phoenix Sun since we have last spoken. Chris Paul is a Golden State Warrior since we've last spoken. So there are some trade stuff that we can talk about. And Chris Paul ended up becoming a Warrior yesterday. So I guess we can maybe talk about that before we get into the trade.
Let's.
How do you feel? How do you feel about Chris Paul being a Golden State Warrior? Because, it seems weird to me. It feels weird to me.
Yeah, I didn't love it. I didn't love the trade. I know the first round pick that they sent is top 20 protected. But in my mind, I really didn't think that, given like it was going to be sort of like a redirection move from Washington, I didn't really expect there to be significant draft compensation involved. And even though Jordan Poole's contract is what it is, I'm very high on him. And so I didn't think that he was necessarily a negative value asset, especially if you put him on a young team where he's going to get a lot of time. Yeah. So I was scratching my head a little bit on that one. I will say that I do think that it's interesting looking at Golden State, a team that has maybe some age concerns. But as far as the fit between CP3 and Steph and what the lineup looks like, I'm not sure. I'm still interested to see what we hear more on that. But I'm interested to see if they go a route where, say, Chris Paul doesn't start. Say they do intend to keep it Steph, Clay, they'd go Wiggins, Draymond, and then Looney, or fill in the gaps however they might want to, and then bring Chris Paul off the bench. I think this move does give them options, and it does put them in a position to be more ready to compete now if they get the version of Chris Paul that they believe that they got. And I do think that he's going to be helpful for them, and I think that, that's great, whatever. But it's a very expensive move, in my opinion, and I didn't love it for them. But the idea of having Steph and bringing Chris Paul potentially off the bench, I would be kind of surprised if that happened. But if they get to a point where they do bring Chris Paul off the bench, I think it would be interesting to have Steph off ball, Clay off ball, having a second unit run by Chris Paul and being able to run the offense through Draymond and just being able to mix and match these lineups. I think it could work, but I just thought the timing of it was a little off. And I think that there could have been better moves for them to make, especially with having Jordan Poole and Jonathan Kuminga to deal. I think there could have been better moves later on. What were your thoughts on it?
So there's a couple ways to tackle this. I'll start with the Warriors side of things.
Yeah.
I think Jordan Poole, for as poor of a season he had last year, especially inking that massive contract, pretty much identical to Tyler Hero's contract.
Mm-hmm.
I think given the fact that he showed so much potential in their championship run, I am genuinely baffled that his trade value has significantly dropped that much to the point where he was a salary dump. He was essentially a salary dump. They actually had to use, like you mentioned, a 2030 first round pick, top 20 protected, and a second round pick, and Ryan Rollins and Patrick Baldwin Jr. in order to just get off of Jordan Poole's contract. I think that is insane. I think that is genuinely insane. Given the type of player Jordan Poole is, the type of ceiling he has, I think Jordan Poole, despite the poor season he had, could be an all-star player. Maybe not a perennial all-star, maybe not a consistent all-star by any means, but can Jordan Poole throughout the rest of his career make a couple of all-star teams? Yes, I really do think he can do that. Now, to be fair, from the Warriors side also, there is the money side of things, the financial constraints, the second apron, which is like, I am so tired of us bringing up the second apron every single time.
I know, it's exhausting.
I heard Zach Lowe the other day be like, you need to have like a second apron shirt, let's do it. Let's talk about it.
Let's do it.
But no, I think, look, from a financial flexibility standpoint, I understand it from the Warriors side. Now they can offer Draymond Green his money. Now they can offer Klay Thompson his money. They do feel and are older.
Yeah.
They just are. They're a lot older than what you would think. Chris Paul is 38. He's gonna be 38 when this season starts. And what Chris Paul is currently in his career is what you described he probably should be for this Warriors team. A guy who can come off of this bench, a guy who can run bench units, a guy who can keep the Warriors afloat when Steph is off the floor, a guy who can make sure that, guys are getting involved, that, guys are getting touches. I think he works really, really well for a guy like Jonathan Kuminga. He can help develop him. That part is huge. To the guy that they drafted, Brandon Podziemski, I think it is, with the 19th pick. He's a guy, a point guard that can be, ushered in, if you will, alongside Chris Paul. I think that's a great pickup for them.
Shooting. Yeah.
Shooting.
I'm with you there.
All there. I just don't think that's what the Warriors needed.
I agree. That's why I'm right there with you.
We kind of talked about it when they got eliminated, but like, they desperately need some size. They need some big dudes. They need like a Jakob Poeltl, a Miles Turner, some kind of a big man that could be this. Yeah, Clint Capella, something like really anything along the lines of that. That would have made so much more sense to me than going ahead and getting Chris Paul.
Right.
But I understand it from a financial flexibility standpoint, because now you're able to extend your guys. Hey, we'll see what happens. The Warriors are getting older. They like, it's weird to say this because, Mike Dunleavy Jr., he was just saying it in the press conference, but like, their goal is to just sign a bunch of vet min guys and see if they can run this back. And yeah, you still have Looney, you still have Wiggins, you still have Draymond, you still have Klay, you still have Curry, obviously. You now have Chris Paul. How you are going to fine-tune this roster by just signing vet min guys, I am not sure it's as attractive as it was when they were racking up championships, I mean, maybe Moses Moody turns into something. Kuminga, like we said, maybe third year, maybe that looks better. But in terms of like, hey, we're going to sign this guy who shouldn't be a vet min guy, but we're going to sign him for a vet min because we're the Warriors, I don't think that will apply anymore. Just because they're not the surefire championship contender. I don't know. But that's my read on the Chris Paul front.
Yeah.
Him going to Golden State. Feel like they have a lot of work to do in the offseason to see how that shakes up. Wanted to ask you in general about the NBA draft. The pageantry, Victor Wembanyama is now officially, after, we knew in May that he was going to be, he's officially a San Antonio Spur. Life-changing stuff for Wemby, and also, honestly, franchise-altering stuff for San Antonio if he is who they think he is supposed to be. From the interviews, I mean, man, he was everywhere. Lauren, he was everywhere. He was on Good Morning America. He was on ESPN. He was on every single TV. It was like, ladies and gentlemen, I have arrived. That's what Wemby.
Pretty unbelievable.
Wemby-mania felt like. It was incredible.
Yeah.
And if he were to live up to this hype, you know,
Whew.
If he ends up, because like we've talked about it, we've mentioned it, we've had draft people on here. This guy is the best prospect since LeBron James, and LeBron is soon to be retiring. He hinted at it, in his end of year presser that like, hey, I'm starting to think about that. I'm starting to think about retiring. Maybe the time is now. I don't think he will next season, but there opens a door for a new face of the league. And yes, there are the Giannis's, there are the Lukas, there are the Jokic's, there are the Currys, there's the Bookers. All those guys are still there, the Embiids. But man, if Wemby becomes who we think he is, it's going to be incredible. Mm-hmm. What was your reaction? Because like San Antonio, obviously you're I don't want to say you're close to San Antonio, but you're in Texas technically. So
I'm in Texas. I'm right up the road in Austin. It's funny because like on a quick in this part of Texas, Central Texas, HEB is like this big thing. The grocery store. It's a grocery store.
I love it.
You love H. Okay, well in Dallas,
I've never been, but okay. I just know the commercials because of Kawhi and Tim Duncan and them. Exactly. Incredible. Yeah.
So they're bringing back the HEB commercials, and it's just he's everywhere, like you said, and so it's really there's just a level of buzz and excitement that it's fun, kind of being a little close to the scene because you've got a lot of people here in Austin that are from San Antonio, and the Spurs fan base is so like loyal and strong, no matter how long it's been or whatever the case may be. And so it's been really cool to just see the buzz. And it was awesome. I loved watching him get drafted and having his family there and being emotional. Like I loved every part of it. I thought it was really special and really amazing. And I think that what you talked about in terms of looking for a new face of the league, I think having someone that is international and kind of embodies a lot of the things that the NBA wants to showcase in terms of the international players and just this global game. I think it's really amazing. And I think, it's prepped and primed for him if he wants it. And so I'm excited for San Antonio. I'm enjoying all these everything going on with San Antonio actually finally getting the media attention. I liked seeing Jeremy Sohan go in and hug him and say, welcome home. I thought that was amazing. So I'm excited for the Spurs. I'm excited for their young group, and I'm glad he's there, even though it's going to suck for the Mavs. I'm really excited to see him next year in the league.
I love that you mentioned Jeremy Sohan because I looked at the Spurs roster afterwards, and I thought, man, like, do they have a shot at a playoff spot next year?
Oh, yeah. They do.
Is that crazy to suggest that maybe look, this is, by the way, I'm not saying the NBA and the second league in French is any different. I mean, look, it is very different, actually, I should say.
I think I know what you're saying.
But my point is, Wemby went to one of the worst teams in France, went there, and then led them to the EuroLeague, the final in France. He beat his former club, all that crazy stuff. That's how transformative of a player he is. I'm not saying he's going to do the same thing in the NBA and lead the Spurs to a title in year one.
Yes.
I'm not saying that. But in terms of transforming a team, the morale, making guys look and play better, you think of guys like Keldon Johnson, who's a shooter, a guy who can be a big kind of wing for them. You look at guys like Devin Vassell, who is a nice dribble handoff hub. He's a good shooter. He's a good creator. Trey Jones, who is a good point guard that they have that works well with Wemby, can get the ball to him in the post. There's other options that they have. Jeremy Sohan, like I mentioned, maybe they go out in free agency. They have a lot of money in free agency that they could go out and make some splashes with. I really, really love what the Spurs are building. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they have freaking Wemby. They do. But it looks and it makes sense now, logistically, basketball, structure-wise. I think we are going to see an accelerated timeline here for San Antonio, whether they like it or not. You talk to a Spurs fan right now and they say, hey, we're going to be patient. We're going to see what it looks like. We're going to be fine. We're just going to see how this thing looks in year one. And I think that is a perfectly fine viewpoint to take. But I imagine that changes once you see Wemby play basketball. I really do think so. So yeah, that is my spiel on the San Antonio Spurs. Very, very happy for the city of San Antonio, for Austin. Every Spurs fan out there, seems like it is just a lot of excitement. Did you see the guy in the jorts?
Oh my God. How could I not see him with the jorts?
I'm buying jorts today. Yeah.
Did you see his hair?
Yes, I did.
You saw it all, huh?
Yeah. Well, listen, I've been watching Yellowstone, so I really want to get a cowboy hat now.
You're all in on the jorts look.
Yeah. Well,
I like it.
Yeah, just yeah, how you doing? My name's Rip. I just need to. I need to. It's
I like
amazing.
It. Full send. I'm with it. I'm with
it. Okay, maybe I'll pull up to the podcast one time and do
there
it. We'll
go.
See. Okay, outside of San Antonio, the other prevailing storyline was what the hell was going to happen between 2 and 3.
Oh my God.
And I was at a bar. I was watching it at a Raptors Republic event. We were doing, just doing a little draft party for the Raptors folks. And when Brandon Miller got selected by the Hornets, it was as if they had won the NBA title. It was all the Raptors fans. War! Scoot, 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 scoot. Like the chants.
I love it. It
was incredible. But obviously that didn't happen. Brandon Miller is going to the Charlotte Hornets. Portland ended up deciding they are not going to trade the pick. At least for now, they are not going to trade the pick. And Scoot Henderson is going to be playing for the Portland Trailblazers. I did not see that happening. I did not see it going down that way. I really thought that when it came down to it, Charlotte would take Scoot.
Me too.
Clearly, it didn't go down that way. Do you agree with that? Because we saw did you see the Mitch Kupchak answer afterwards, where it's like, hey, why'd you pick Mitch? Why'd you pick Brandon Miller?
Yeah.
And he's like, have you seen the video of the baby, the kid? He's like, he had no answer. He had no answer. So, I mean, do you have an answer as to why they maybe took Brandon Miller?
Oh God, as to why I really don't. I have no idea why. I'm not, and that's going to sound incredibly ignorant because obviously he's a very good player and he's very talented. But for so long, I'm so high on Scoot, and he seems so. Not only does he have the physical tools and skill set, but even just the way he carries himself, like he just looks ready. He looks so ready. And I just have so many questions about Brandon Miller. And it's not that I don't think he's going to be a good player. I do. But I think Scoot Henderson, there's enough there to reasonably believe that he's going to be a franchise altering player. And it's not that I don't feel like Brandon Miller could do that, but I just feel a lot less sure about it. And so I always felt like no matter what was being put out there, no matter where the odds went, that it was going to ultimately be Scoot. Kind of like you said, I don't know if you felt as strongly, but that's where I felt like it was headed. And I felt like that was the right move for Charlotte. And so for them to go with Brandon Miller, something that people seem to be kind of, I don't want to say on the fence about, but you have some people saying home run, and then you've got others saying should have went with Scoot. And I think in a draft like this, you should never find yourself in a position where it's like, oh, you should have done something else. I don't think I don't think there's that, especially, I mean, not a knock on Charlotte, but I do think that given the position that you're in, you don't have the luxury of finding yourself in that position. So I do hope for their sake it works out for them. I'm excited to see what he looks like in a Charlotte uniform. But if I had that number 2 pick, I would have gone with Scoot and wouldn't have looked back.
I wonder how much fit came into consideration here. And I say that because I hate when fit comes into consideration that high in the draft. It's like, you were that high in the draft for a reason. It's just truthful.
It's true.
There is a reason you were the 2nd overall pick. I mean, yes, the lottery odds kind of, blessed them in the sense that Detroit and Houston fell, but you were one of the worst teams in the NBA. You were not in a position to consider fit. Yes, you have LaMelo Ball. Mark Jones is an interesting center. Who knows what they'll do with the rest of the roster? They have some decisions they have to make on that front. But in terms of being like, oh, we have this wing in Brandon Miller who fits well, and he is the position of need that we have, I don't think that is the thought process to have in this point of where the Hornets are. Brandon Miller could very well prove all of us wrong and become the all-star, all-NBA type of player that he has the potential of being.
Yes.
I don't think that is anything crazy to say. I think he has the potential to do something like that, to have a phenomenal career. There's a reason he was so successful in college and why he obviously got drafted second overall. But I think when you're talent evaluating, you just don't have to look at fit in that perspective.
Yeah.
Scoot, and by the way, like, even if you're looking at fit, Scoot and LaMelo do work together.
I know. I don't get that. I don't
Yeah.
get the people that are like, that's not going to work. That's just not going to work. I don't see that. But
Yeah, I mean, look, Scoot has all the explosive, get to the basket, scoring ability type of things that LaMelo doesn't. And he also has some of the, craft and playmaking stuff that LaMelo does. And LaMelo is an incredible playmaker. He's a guy who can find Scoot off ball as a shooter, as a cutter, et cetera, et cetera. It is a match made in heaven. It's not even just like that it would work. It would be a great fit. So I don't understand. Unless folks like, so the thing that reminds me of this, very, very much so reminds me after we saw the reactions from Charlotte Hornets fans. I don't know if you saw the videos of people being like, oh.
Yeah, I saw the mascot too.
The mascot. Yeah, that was hilarious. That was funny. That was very funny. But it kind of reminds me of the Scotty Barnes, Jalen Suggs draft. I was at a draft party for that too. And a lot of people said it has to be Suggs. It has to be Suggs. You have to draft Suggs. You have to draft Jalen Suggs. And the Raptors didn't. They drafted Scotty Barnes. And I was at that draft party, and you see people booing, yelling, screaming, angry. I mean, on Raptors Twitter, at least, it's a common video to bring up to be like, look how dumb you guys were. And maybe in a couple of years, we look back on this the same way. Maybe Brandon Miller makes us all look stupid. Yeah. But who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
The trickle effect of this is what will happen with Damian Lillard. And how that looks moving forward. I mean, there's been so many rumors. There's Chris Haynes feels like every other week is saying that Damian Lillard, there's pressure on the clock type of thing.
Right.
And I wonder how real that is. I wonder if it's more just like a nudge to be like, hey, I would like to create a competitive roster. Why aren't we doing those things? Or it's an ultimatum. We just talked about this off air, but do you think that Dame gets traded this summer? Do you think this year is the year?
I do think that this year is the year. It's really hard to be like, oh, well, maybe they should just give it a year with Scoot, see what they look like. But it's just at this point in Dame's career and what we just saw him do last year, he's ready to go, and he has made it as clear as he possibly can that he wants to go now. And so Portland keeping the pick and selecting Scoot, I also do think that was the right move for them. I think that that's where I stand on it. I don't need to get into that too much right now. But as far as Dame goes, I mean, for him individually and for the team, even though it's a tough decision, it's a hard decision, I think it's the right for both parties to move on. And so I think that will be what ultimately happens. We'll just have to see how things go. I do wonder if it had been Brandon Miller that they ended up with, if they might feel like, well, we don't know that we necessarily have the foundation to go full rebuild, but maybe with Scoot, does that help or hurt that? I mean, I think there's an argument that it helps it. So I just feel like everything is lining up, even the narratives and the stories and the things that are going out, whether it be Chris Haynes or Shams tweeting that Dame is going to take time to think this decision. It all just feels like it's teeing up for Dame to say, you know what? It's time to move on. Thank you. Everything Portland, blah, blah, blah. We'll see it all. But I feel like it's just inevitable. I hate to use that word. You and I we've talked about this word and how many times in the past it's been used and it doesn't end up happening.
Yeah.
But in this situation right here, it just feels like it has been such a long time coming.
I agree. I think this year, I mean, I feel like I say this every year, but this year feels more likely than any other year that he does, in fact, finally ask out and want to leave. But I don't think it's a problem if he doesn't. I think Scoot makes it so that they can decide which way they want to go a little bit later. if you look at you've mentioned this before, but the log jam that they have at the guard spot already, you have Scoot, you have Dame, you have Sharp, you have Simons, right? That's four guards who need the ball in their hands. They need touches. Maybe not Sharp, but most of those guys need touches. They need to get reps. They need to get opportunity. And it becomes tricky when you have an all-NBA player in Dame. I think if they were to decide to move Dame, it obviously opens things up and makes it easier to start a rebuild. So now that you have, you have Scoot, you have Sharp, you have Simons maybe, you have, anything that you get from Dame, whether it be in Brooklyn and Nick Claxton and all those guys, maybe something like that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you decide not to, because of that logjam at the guard spot, you might be more susceptible to say like, hey, maybe we can trade two of these guards or one of these guards. So now I think Simon seems like the odd man out because, okay, second year Sharp, first year Scoot, maybe Scoot comes off the bench or maybe Scoot starts, who knows?
Yeah.
But like, even if Dame is around, I could see it being easier to trade one of those guards now, knowing that you can, sort of work around and make it so that it still is okay if Dame requests a trade 2 years from now, because you still have Scoot and Sharp or Simons and Sharp or Simons and Scoot, whatever.
Yeah.
I think there's a way they can finagle this.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to happen. I think this is probably the year where Dame says, yeah, you know what? I'm going to rethink things. And he probably ends up a Miami Heat or a Brooklyn Net. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we will have to see on kind of what the list looks like. If there even is a list that goes out. I feel like recently, not just with Bradley Beal, but we're starting to see less and less lists made public than we used to. You know what I mean? It felt like there was always a list. And now it seems like there are these internal meetings and then a player just gets dealt. And I think that this situation with Dame could be exactly how that goes. And while there are many teams out there that could offer a better package than Miami could, I think Miami can offer a good enough package that gets everyone what they want. And so I do kind of expect that to happen. I will say it's worth noting that they have the option to bring Jeremy Grant back if they want to, but he is already being linked to other teams. He's going to command a lot of money. So that's a big decision that Portland would have to make and a lot of money that they would have to commit. So it's a big decision in terms of which direction you want to go, not just do we run it back or do we not? Because if you do keep Dame and don't trade him, then you probably will have to go re-sign and commit all that money to Jeremy Grant. And so there's that layer to it as well. And realistically, where do you think that group could get you? I like the idea of keeping Dame and Scoot and bringing back Jeremy and seeing what you can go get maybe at the trade deadline or in free agency, depending on how things go with Anthony Simons. Because I do think you could go out and maybe get someone. We just saw what timing did for Boston acquiring Kristaps Porzingis before the Marcus Smart got announced.
Right.
We saw what that was going to be. And so sometimes you can go out and get someone that's a bit of an experimental fit or something worth swinging on. And Anthony Simons is no joke. That kid, I mean, he can play. So I think Portland, I don't want to say they have zero options, but right now I would expect them to move on from Dame.
My favorite trade for Portland is to do DeAndre Ayton for Nurkic and Simons. That's my favorite. Like that, I feel like that's a good trade because Ayton is young. So if you do decide to move off of Dame in a couple of seasons, maybe next season, whatever. Now you have Scoot and Ayton and Sharp, and those are the guys that you can build around, right? And you have Grant as your massive contract that you can, in a couple of years, you can trade away.
Yeah.
But Nurkic is getting older. Simons is like the young piece there that can maybe entice Phoenix. And Phoenix also needs to do it to the point where like Ayton needs to be multiple guys. If they trade Ayton, they need to get depth that makes sense around Ayton.
Right.
So like getting Simons, who can be that fifth guy in your starting lineup, and Nurkic, who can maybe be a center for you. I really like that trade for both sides.
Yeah.
But I don't know who says yes or no on that. So what do you think?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because I don't know where to pinpoint Ayton right now. Before the draft, there was buzz that he might be able to get traded without any draft compensation.
Yeah.
Because for a while it was like, Dallas, are you going to pull the trigger and include 10 to go get Ayton? And there was so much debate. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, we may not even have to include the 10th, and you can just go get him with guys like Phoenix needs, like you mentioned. And so personally, because of how high I am on Anthony Simons, I don't necessarily I kind of feel like that would be a bit of an overpay on Portland's spot, or from where Portland is. But at the same time, we just saw what happened with Jordan Poole. So it that's not how it works. A lot of times it's, what do you need? And I really am intrigued by the Ayton fit in Portland, because we're talking about the log jam at guard that they're kind of looking at, really with or without Dame, which might sound crazy. But they just committed all this money to Nurkic, which the second they did that, I wasn't a huge fan of that. And so if you can go out and get someone who's young, has room to grow, and also can compete now at a low price, there are not many of those guys, and Ayton is. And so I really like Portland going after that. And you do that, you bring back Jeremy Grant. I think that does open some things up for them. Especially, I think it kind of kicks the can down the road if they need to decide if they want to move on from Dame. And then you're also in a position where you could then move on from Jeremy Grant if you had to. And then you have this core. So I think Ayton to Portland is definitely something to keep your eye on.
Hopefully I'm right on this. I'm kind of,
I like it. I really like it. I think it's sneaky.
We'll see. I've actually been trying to get Ayton to Portland for a while now.
I think it's good.
Wasn't even working for SDPN the first time I suggested that idea. That's how long it's been since I've been trying to get Portland to go for Ayton. So anyways, okay, look, that is the 2-3 conversation / Dame conversation. Any other kind of tidbits, notes from the draft that you want to mention? Oh, actually, we should probably talk about the teams that we cover. That probably makes a lot of sense.
Let's talk about them, yes.
Okay, Dallas. A lot of shaking and baking here. You guys now have Rashawn Holmes. You have Derek Lively. Am I missing anybody? I feel like you guys drafted another player.
You are. When we sent the trade exception, or absorbed, we also got the 24th pick in the draft, which belonged to Sacramento.
Oh, and you drafted my Canadian boy.
Yeah,
Omax.
We did.
Yeah.
Yes, we are very excited to have Omax. I think bringing in him and bringing in Lively is exactly, Dallas has been talking about since draft night, which obviously was only last night. Nico Harrison has had several quotes saying that they felt like they crushed the draft, and that they got guys that are not only obviously young and intriguing, but are ready to contribute now. And he feels that they will be given the opportunity to do so. So I'm very excited, because Dallas added size and they added defense, which is something that they have not had. And that's been by far their biggest weakness. So to be able to get Lively while also moving off of Bertans, that already was a solid move. But then to go ahead and add Omax as well, and get even Rashawn Holmes, who, even though he fell out of the rotation in Sacramento, I think having Dwight Powell as a free agent and having, this money going to Rashawn Holmes, you have the opportunity to bring back Dwight Powell and just have more depth in the front court, which is something, again, that they haven't really had in the past. And so I'm excited for this group. I think they're at a really good starting point. And with how they juggled their moves on draft night, they now do have a lot of money. They have MLE money to go out and work with. And so right now, assuming they give Kyrie the full max, everything, they'll have a little bit less than the full MLE. But if for some reason they can get him to take closer to 40, which I don't foresee happening, they'll have the full MLE, or they can go out, make some trades, clear a little bit of money with JaVale McGee or some of these other guys, and then have the full MLE to go after someone who they wouldn't have had a shot at in the first place. So I feel like everything that they did in the draft was a move for now. It was a move for the future. I really, really was pleased with what they were able to pull off.
Omax is a guy that his stock was rising a lot during the draft process. A lot of people were high on him. Obviously, he's a Canadian, so we follow that a little bit more. But from what I read and from what I've seen, like he was rising up the rankings, if you will. So you guys being able to grab him in the 20s, that's huge. And then Lively, I feel like was always going to be the guy for you guys at 10 or 12.
Thank God.
It seemed like it made so much sense from a fit perspective. You guys obviously needed a big. maybe he can be a contributor right away, like you mentioned. I like it. I really, really like what the Mavs did. And I mean, you guys are going to re-sign Kyrie. I think
so too.
That seems like it's going to be evident, especially with how things are shaking out with Los Angeles and the Clippers and whatnot. I really do think that Kyrie ends up re-signing there. So now it's how are you going to move around the margins, right? You mentioned the MLE. Who's that guy you're going to target? Do you feel like you have a favorite there for who they might grab?
I do. I want to see them go for Harrison Barnes. I don't know that they can get him at that dollar amount. I think
reuniting.
Yeah, I think that Sacramento, you and I have talked about this off air a little bit. I think that they're potentially moving in a different direction. I don't think that they're totally closed off from moving Harrison Barnes, but I think he's out there for the taking. And so I think he could get a little bit more money to stay there or even go somewhere else, or he could come here and be an upgrade for us, come back to Dallas where he did a lot of great work for the community. He likes Dallas from what I have heard. And he would be a good get for us, a good veteran presence. I think he's kind of the one that I could see them going for, especially when you're looking at them not really giving up anyone. I mean, from the few defensive guys that they have, they now find themselves with Maxey, Josh Green, Reggie Bullock, Omax, more guys than more guys than they've had to establish a defensive identity. So to go out and get someone who you can defer to a little bit, but also not necessarily expect a ton out of them, I think makes a lot of sense. But I fully expect them to go out and get crafty and try to come up with a way to get that full MLE money. Whether it be dealing JaVale McGee, even Tim Hardaway Jr. potentially, I would put that as less likely, but I think that they have moves to make and they're not done. They've made that very clear.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, very, very successful draft for the Dallas Mavericks. For the Raptors, I think also the same. I think a lot of people, I mean, in February, there were some draft people on Raptors Twitter who were like, we need Grady Dick. We need Grady Dick. We need Grady Dick. We need Grady Dick. It's weird that I'm saying it this many times, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But
I love it.
Yes, Grady Dick is a Toronto Raptor at number 13. He is the guy that a lot of Raptors fans have been clamoring over, but didn't think would be available at 13. But the way the draft shook out, it seemed more and more likely. I think especially with Orlando taking Jet Howard, it really opened up the doors for the Raptors to take Grady. I would imagine that if Grady was taken beforehand, Kobe Buffkin would be a Toronto Raptor.
Wow.
That's not what happened, though. And, we'll never know if that was the actual case, if that was going to be the case. But Grady is a guy who fits perfectly. I think, I'm making a video about it right now, but what he brings is something that the Raptors can use on day one, which is a guy who can be a floor spacer for you, a guy who can be a connective passer for you. He should be a seamless fit next to Scotty Barnes. And that works well, whether they decide to keep this roster intact and run it back and do the same thing next season, or if they decide to retool and they want to build around Scotty Barnes at any point in time. They have a guy like Grady Dick who makes so much sense around Scotty. A lot of people have brought up like Duncan Robinson as a comparison. And okay, I can see what you're saying because he's a good dribble handoff hub. He's a great shooter. Mm-hmm. But I think there's way more that Grady can provide offensively than what Duncan Robinson initially provided offensively. Duncan Robinson was flat out just a spot up catch and shoot type player. He did some of the dribble handoff stuff with Bam, but Grady can do some stuff connectively as a passer. He's a pretty decent defender. I think he's a way better defender than what Duncan Robinson was to start out his career. Yeah. And I think just overall, considering that, he looks to me more like a 6'8" Klay Thompson than a 6'8" Duncan Robinson because he can do a little bit more for you. I'm not saying he's going to go out and be Klay, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
I'm just saying that he tangibly can do way more for you on the ball as a creator, as a guy who can create for others. So yeah, I love that aspect of his game. And yeah, I'll have a video about that later, but I think he was the pick that made sense whether they go in one direction or the other. And who knows, man? I think there's been so many rumors around the Raptors and what they'll do. Will the Hawks trade for Siakam, et cetera, et cetera? Maybe they do. Maybe that ends up happening. The Raptors are under some financial restraints that makes sense for them to move and shake things up a little bit. Maybe Fred VanVleet decides to walk. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But I think regardless, Grady was a good pick. So
yeah, I think he was too. And I think that people are going to see a different, maybe more so non-Raptors people that have been like looking at him in that spot as a potential pick, but people that didn't know where he was going to go, maybe aren't too familiar with him. When he is in Toronto, I think that they're going to see more and see what he can do, and kind of goes back to your comparison more so than a Duncan Robinson. I do think that his athleticism, he's a little bit more athletic than I think some people might give him credit for. And so I think having the flexibility to play with a young team surrounded by so many versatile players is going to be really good for his game. And I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised by some of the plays that he can make and some of the things that he ends up doing beyond just, the shooting, the obvious shooting.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, the Raptors still have a long off season. Like I mentioned, the free agency stuff between Fred and Jakob. There's still going to be Pascal Siakam trade rumors that happen. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, there's still going to be a lot more trade rumors that happen over this next week. We are entering free agency time now. The draft is over. Summer League is in 2 weeks. Free agency is in a week. So we are dead in the heap of free agency time. The NBA season, the 12-year season that we talk about, is almost over. There's like 3 or 4 weeks left of pandemonium, of craziness, of checking your phone consistently to see if Woj or Shams or Chris Haynes or Jake Fisher dropped any type of news. And then it's done for about a month. I think August is dead. I think September, it starts to get a little bit more crazy. And then, we start off with a new season. Excitement in the air. Lauren, anything you want to mention before we head out?
No, I'm excited. I'm excited for free agency. It's going to be a good one. But it'll be good. It'll be good.
Okay, cool. Tap in, ladies and gentlemen, on the Objective Basketball Podcast. As always, we've got some great stuff coming. Lauren will be here. I'm telling you right now, Lauren will be here. I'm telling you, I'm putting my foot down. She will be here. She'll be here. We'll also be live. I will at least be. If you want to tag along, come hang out. I will be live at Summer League in 2 weeks. So, we will definitely be doing a podcast there or two. And we'll react to some of the craziness that happens there. Summer League is also a wild time because, Wemby, you see all the rookies for the first time, but it's also like in the heap of free agency and transaction moves. So, you're there and you're looking at Woj, you're looking at Shams, they're looking at their phone and they're thinking of it's a crazy time, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you very much for tapping into the Objective Basketball Podcast. As always, do the liking, the subscribing, the things that you guys always do to help support this thing. And we will see you guys later. Take care.
Follow hosts at Just S Baraheni on all socials and at The Lauren Gunn on Twitter. The Objective Basketball Podcast, delivering the NBA to you like no other.